My name is Bruce Hughes. I'll be the acting chair for this committee meeting tonight. The chair, Wayne Smith, has a conflict, so I'll be running the meeting tonight. So this is a continuance of the public hearing, and I'd like to give the proponents to present an update on what they've got presented to us tonight. So, welcome.
Thank you. Is this working?
Just for the TV.
Oh, okay, so, yeah, because I don't hear it.
There's a magnifier in the room.
And her enough, I should know that. I'm Dan Bailey. I am a land use attorney with Pierce Atwood in Boston and real estate counsel to this project. With me here tonight are John Iredale, who's the owner of the Karsten Company and the owner of the project. Sevi Strakalovsky, I never get that right, he's the architect. Brian Marchetti is the civil engineer, and Jack Gillen, our traffic engineer, is also here. What we'd like to do is summarize where the project now stands, go over the changes since the last hearing in November, our response to Beals and Thomas, the peer reviewer comments, and then return it to the board for any specific questions that you might have for the team. You know, move from there. I mean, this is been a number of public hearings, and we're not going to go and do the big whole show that, you know, we often do. You know, we're going to try and focus on where the changes are and our responses to the Beals and Thomas comments. So just to summarize, the project is now designed, and we've got some boards up, and you've got the plans in front of you. But the access to this project is on Monahan Drive, which is an existing private way that currently provides access to the commuter rail station. The project as now currently proposed is 5 buildings with a total of 150 units. All of the units are 1 and 2 bedrooms. One building is a mixed-use building with 36 housing units, 5,200 square feet of community space, and 6,000 square feet of retail space. The remaining 4 buildings are townhouse-style buildings that are entirely residential and are all 2-bedroom. Since the last meeting, we've made changes to the plans in response to comments from Beals and Thomas, and from the public and from the board. The most significant change, can I take this with me? Sure. Is to move the mixed-use building. If you'll remember, it previously sort of came down like this and went across like that. We moved it to the back corner, and this has been in response to concerns about opening up the site. So that's been moved back, landscaping around it, parking in front of it, and you know, provides a greater extent of sort of feeling of air and openness. The other changes we've increased the amount of commercial use to 6,000 square feet. The commercial use is on the first floor of that multi-use building. These uses will be small neighborhood type uses, dry cleaner, convenience store, you know, deli. You know, there were a lot of comments in the past about concerns about creating some sort of commercial, destination commercial use. At one point, you know, you'll remember that there was a daycare proposed. We've moved away from those types of commercial uses, and these are the types that would be used by residents or by nearby owners. We've increased the parking to 231 spaces. We've also satisfied, which is a little over 1.5 spaces per unit. We've also satisfied all of the issues raised by Beals and Thomas, with the exception of 2 issues that were left to the board's discretion, and I'm going to speak a little bit to those. They both have to do with zoning bylaw requirements. You know, particularly with respect to standalone buildings, the bylaw states that residential uses are allowed within the district only as part of a larger mixed-use development and not as a standalone principal use, except by special permit from the planning board. That's what we're here for. We're here for a special permit for standalone use for the 4 townhouse buildings. The other issue that's been raised is whether 6,000 square feet of commercial space meets the bylaw requirements. It does. The bylaw states that residential components of a mixed-use TOD development can exceed 50% of the total gross floor area when the residential use is located on upper floors of a commercial building. The multi-use building has commercial and community space on the first floor and 32 multifamily units on the second and third floors. So roughly 2/3 of the floor area on the upper floors is residential. So the project as proposed is eligible for a special permit. All of the other Beals and Thomas issues have been resolved as reported in their letter of January 28, 2020. If the board or Beals and Thomas representatives have any questions, people from our engineering and architectural team are here to answer them. There's one other issue that I want to address. It was a legal issue that was raised, I think, at one of the earlier hearings that I wasn't at. And there was concerns expressed by an abutter about an easement. I've got a board on this that runs along the westerly edge. It's down here of the property. Well, that easement actually has been abandoned. Here's a plan, and I apologize that it's not the greatest plan, but as I think your council knows, getting plans out of Plymouth Registry of Deeds online can be very difficult. But this is from the Registry of Deeds. This is the definitive subdivision plan that was approved by this board for the construction of Monahan Crossing, and that's the access to the MBTA station. Previously, there was an easement for the benefit of Center Ave Realty Trust, which owns property right here on Center Street. And that easement ran along the southern, or the western boundary up to Plymouth Street, and the idea was to provide access to Plymouth Street. But the definitive subdivision approval for Monahan Crossing said that that easement was to be relocated here, 50, and this is shown on our plans, a 54-foot easement from the Center Ave Realty Trust property here up to Monahan Crossing, thereby giving Center Ave Realty Trust the benefit of the easement that it used to have along here. And this plan says, it's hard to read, but it says 50-foot wide easement to be abandoned by Center Ave Realty Trust. So two things I have to say on that. One is there's an easement, but in practical terms, it makes all the sense in the world. Instead of going along here, and which could never be built because it's all wet, it now goes up here and out that way. And the other thing I'm going to say is, for very good reasons, and this is one of them, because it's very hard for boards to get involved in determining property rights. Boards will typically leave those issues to the courts, which are more suited to addressing them, because otherwise you end up with hearings listening to real estate lawyers for hours talk about who has what rights. So that's all that I have to say, and so I leave it back to you for questions for our team.
Okay, I'm going to open this up to questions from the board. Anyone have any questions for these gentlemen?
I think these questions are more for our engineer, just so that we understand fully kind of how this is going. So anybody who goes to the site, you stand on Monahan Crossing, you look off the edge, and you can see that the land drops down foot, foot and a half, 2 feet in spots. It gets wet. I don't think all of it meets the definition of a wetland. But this is where they're projecting to build. They're going to put some fill in there. They're going to build their stormwater retainment systems. So as our engineer reviewing this, what they proposed for stormwater, it's not going to worsen flooding or water runoff to the neighbors in any way? And is the system going to work so that when we have big rainfalls, that their system will work and hold water and not flood out neighborhoods?
It will.
It will.
Based on the calculations provided.
Okay.
In accordance with, like, Mass DEP standards and everything, they've shown that what they proposed will work.
Okay. Generally, is the standard for approval that it can hold, a 2-inch rainstorm, a 4-inch rainstorm, kind of what's the?
They have storage up to a 100-year rainstorm.
Okay.
Which is like an 8-inch rainstorm.
Okay.
There will be some discharge at that point, but I think the standards usually is like a 25-year storm.
Yeah.
Which is like a 5 or 6 inch storm typically. And they've demonstrated that. I mean, there's 5 underground storage facilities
Yeah.
proposing. So they have a lot of volume underground if they're holding. They're only one of those systems has conductivity to the groundwater.
Mhm.
So basically, they're just holding tanks.
Yeah, they're holding
So
tanks.
basically, they're basically holding it,
Yeah,
letting the storm pass, and then it'll kind of release it slowly. So you don't get those, like, you don't get that flooding surge.
all right. So if we have, a rainy stretch of, we get an inch of rain every day for 5 days, this isn't going to result in flooding off-site or anything? Or if we have one of those big summer gully washers that comes down, we get 6 inches of rain in an hour,
Then but that's.
everyone gets flooded at that
that's
point?
Yeah, that's like that's something that is kind of uncontrollable.
Okay. So one of the other things on the plan was that they did the surveying back, or the land assessment, I think back in 2016, and I think back in 2016, we're in the middle of a drought.
Okay.
Any concerns about doing it then versus now when we're kind of out of the
We
drought?
have referenced, they're still gonna have to go, they're still gonna have to go to Conservation
Yep.
Commission. They're just trying to do one thing at a time,
Okay.
which we've referenced in our letter, so, assuming this gets approved, then they're still going to Conservation Commission, but all that stuff will be vetted at that time.
Okay. So, speaking of the Conservation Commission, I think this is more for the applicants now. You have proposed a possible parking area in the front of the site, off Summer Street. Is that included in the 231 spaces, or is that in addition to the 231 spaces?
That is included in the 231 spaces.
Okay, so if that is not built, how many spaces would be available?
So if it's not built, we have, I believe it was 179, which still exceeds. So the reserve area, let's see, 179 spaces would be there if this was not built. The reserve area contains an additional 52 spaces. So total required per zoning, we're at 171, so we still have a surplus of 8.
So under our current regs, you still exceed what's required for the site. This is more just, it's a nice to have.
Yes, yes, it was at the previous hearing in November, between your engineering consultants, expressed their concern that, they felt a number more along the lines of 1.4 spaces per unit was more appropriate for a use like this. So we added these spaces in here to accommodate that number.
So my concern is if conservation says, no, it's too close to the wetlands area, you can't build these, what happens then?
Well, we still meet zoning.
Yeah,
We could still build some number of reserve. We show it now, I'm trying to max out the area, but still make it a design that's permittable under the Wetland Protection Act.
so who's going to be monitoring the parking lot when this is built? My concern being people either going to take the T, but they park in this area instead, or what if everybody who moves into this development has 2 cars? Is there going to be a cap on the amount of cars allowed into the development?
Yeah, there'll have to be. It'll have to be capped at the number of parking spaces. And the owner absolutely will monitor to make sure people aren't using parking spaces and going to the T. And I assume, and yeah, he could speak to it, but I assume, and having worked with other owners, you post it and you say, no all-day parking, if, you will be towed. You have surveillance cameras. I park every day at the Route 128 T station, and there's a commercial office building right across the street. And there are very big signs that says it, basically, this is a really bad idea. And it's well-known,
Yeah.
that you will get towed because he does. So, you've got to, you're absolutely right. If it's not managed, it will get used.
Yeah.
But you've got to be aggressive and manage it.
So of the 179 spaces, I'm just taking out the 231 for right now, but for the 179 spaces, are any reserved for guests?
I don't know, but I mean,
Yeah, there's-
there's probably some in front.
Yeah, there's no specified guest parking area.
Okay.
It's just, we have a surplus of, 9 spaces, or
Okay.
8 spaces.
So there won't be a designated visitor parking area. People will just, if they,
I think that's more programmatic, once they figure out, the whole system
Yeah.
and layout of this.
Odds are, it'll probably be something up in here, right up where you would pull in, would be visitor parking. That makes sense.
My concern more is that, again, making sure that we're staying within the number of spots that we have, we're not overselling it, that if people come with a guest, that they're not all of a sudden, there's a fight for spots. We can't have parking on Summer Street, because it's just not feasible. We can't have parking in Monahan Way, correct? There's no parking proposed in Monahan Way. So I think we want to make sure, and we've done this for other projects in town, where we say, as a condition, you're capped on the number basically of cars that are allowed to have stickers or whatever you are going to use to monitor.
Yeah, and one of the ways that multifamily operators have been managing this is, well, some of them charge for parking. I don't know ultimately what the plan is here, but I would expect if there's no charge for parking, and my guess is that there wouldn't be, because it's a suburban location and people expect to have it. It's not like you're in downtown Quincy where it's kind of optional. But they'll cap people at one space per unit. That's what your lease payment gets you. And if you want more, you have to pay more. And and when you run out, you run out.
So for my board members, I'd like to consider including that as one of the conditions, is that there's a parking management plan so that we don't oversell or oversubscribe and end up with a bad parking situation down there. Progress Street. So I went down to the site this weekend, and there's a lot of mature trees. I know there's a 50-foot buffer basically between the property line and the building. However, a lot of those trees are mature, which means that the bottom branches are, 20, 30 feet up at this point. New screening proposed for between the property line and Progress Street and the buildings itself.
So the current design, we maintain about a 20-foot vegetated buffer. We have grading, because we have to fill on the property in order to maintain our setbacks of groundwater for infiltration for stormwater. So we're currently proposing on that backside the pervious fire lane. So we'll have no cars parking back there. It's going to be pervious. Right now, we have just a type of fence. I believe I noted on the plan a split rail fence or something like that, just as a demarcator of where the edge of the fire lane is. But, the applicant's certainly open to, if you wanted another type of privacy fence or additional landscaping or some sort of screening, that could certainly be added as a condition.
I'd certainly like to consider it, both a fence and some screening, because if you go out there in the wintertime, you can see straight through the entire site because there's no vegetation.
Yep.
So if there's some way that we can block sight, noise, whatever, I'm sure that's not going to make the Progress Street residents fully happy, but I think it's a...
Well, actually, I was looking at understanding that you're going to provide a tree screen there for the people on Progress Street. That they've talked about abrevieties, and I was going to bring up that we've been not liking the abrevieties anymore because they just fall over when they get big enough. But that 20-foot buffer, my understanding was that for the residents, there was going to be a screening of abrevieties down behind the fence.
So the original plan, we had parking right up to it,
Right.
retaining wall. So when that was removed, we just proposed the vegetated buffer, the existing buffer that was there. We've discussed this today and recently with the applicant. An additional landscape buffer is not shown on the plans that were submitted last month, but that's a very easy condition that we'd agree to, you could add.
No, I only brought it up because I thought it was part of what we had talked about, that buffer with the tree screen, but I can't be
Yeah, I think it was specific to, instead of having the driveway, we were giving them vegetative buffer, which was the existing buffer. But that's, like I said, we agree to that, it's something we can easily add.
Yeah,
It can be conditioned.
I mean, the way I've seen it done a lot of times is that a condition is included that requires a landscape plan to be, approved by either a town planner, may not work here, or, by the board, an informal hearing. And I'd agree with you that arborvitae's are a bad idea, because if the snow doesn't get them, the deer do.
Yeah.
Some other sort of pine, evergreen of some sort.
Yeah, yeah.
15, 20 feet.
There are some arborvitae's that work a lot better, and a landscape person could tell you a lot better than I could, but hemlocks work.
Is there something that doesn't get eaten or is unattractive to deer? My wife and I have a camera in the backyard, and we see the deer come into our backyard all the time at night, and we live on a busy street.
Yeah, my experience was the deer went right past my hemlocks to eat the arborvitae. So, and the hemlocks, they're good because, you know, white pines are lousy because for the reasons that you just were talking about. The minute they get 10 or 15 years old, the bottoms drop out, you know, they get big and tall and they get weak and fall over. So hemlocks work. We work with a landscaper who I'm sure can, you know, do something that, you know, provide some variety too, you know, so it just doesn't look like a row. You know, it's solid, but it, you put, one in front of another, you step them off.
We want something that would last a long time, that would look attractive, that wouldn't get eaten by the deer, and, would provide the effective screening.
Yeah, we have a professional landscape architect on our team, so we can easily provide that detail.
So I saw the letter that there's sewer capacity to the site. Did you confirm that there's water availability?
Yeah, the Sewer and Water Commission both
Okay.
provided letters.
And did the fire chief sign off on the turning radiuses?
So we, excuse me,
It's right there.
fire chief is here. The applicant and I met with the fire chief. We reviewed the plan back in the beginning of January? And some recommendations were made about widening the curb flares coming off of the main roadway into the site. And we provided a revised truck turn plan with the largest Abington fire truck that showed that there was no jump in the curb, no interference with parking spaces. And we did provide that additional curb radii at all the entrances.
Okay. Chief, could I come back to you in 1 second? Okay. Just one more question for right now. For our town council. So they brought up the issue of the easement that goes through the property. As a planning board, are we restricted in any way in adopting, hypothetically, a site plan that includes construction over an existing easement? Do they have to resolve it first? Do we have to leave it open?
No, it would be a private matter.
Okay. And if in settling the private matter, it materially impacts the site plan that we've approved, do they have to come back?
Definitely.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Bob, do you have anything?
No.
Jeff?
I do. I'd like to go back to that, the long easement, I understand, the one that goes out to Summer, but the short 54-foot one that runs up the parking space, what's the story with that piece?
That's an existing easement for,
It's an existing easement, but that's not the one that goes away when they build.
no, that's there. We've got a design so that, it's this
The parking area.
area over here, the parking area. So, you can come off here, go right up here, and down Monahan Crossing.
Like the dumpster that's here could easily be moved elsewhere.
If indeed they wanted to develop on the road, okay.
So we could easily make that happen. Grading wise, it's already a driveway all the way down. That could
So
also.
could you hold that board up, let the folks in the audience, and we rephrase that, just repeat that, please, so the folks out there can see it.
Thank you.
So look, easement is a dashed line right here, so this driveway would be the new easement to access this back parcel. And we could easily accommodate in the future if the owner ever decided to exercise that right and access his site through this easement. All it would take would be moving this dumpster location from.
And that's coming out to Summer Street?
No, that's from Monahan Way, just down this parking aisle.
The point is, you can go from Summer Street down Monahan Crossing through this area and then get out to Center Street through the easement holder's property.
So is that where the two businesses are?
I don't know what's there.
Is that going to be theoretical or actual? Is that just if they ever decided to do that, or is that actually going to be common pavement going through?
It's, if they want to do it, they have the right to do it.
As we get into, I think we're transitioning right now, I think, into, anyone else?
Yes. If you want to pursue that.
Yeah, I just one more thing, and then I'm gonna let Jeff, Mr. Rangel, ask a question, and I'm gonna open this up to you folks. So, Jeff.
Well, actually, I wanted to go back to the fire chief, because I know that you showed the layout, but I also know there was conversation about the pervious driveway behind Building E. And I was concerned with that. I know it can hold the weight of the engine, but the marker is showing that, you talked about a fence there. But what type of markers are out there, like in the wintertime, or how can they tell what they're doing out there? And actually, Chief, if you considered this, then I'd like to ask
Get
you
some
to,
questions when you're done.
perhaps,
Actually, if you guys are going to address this, could you like hold it up there so everyone can see?
So, in the previous meeting, there was some concern about the weight of the bearing pressure of a fire apparatus, whether it would be able to, whether a pervious pavement system, be it grass pave or pervious pavers, would be able to handle that type of pressure. These systems are designed, the pervious paver in particular is designed to handle over 15,000 PSI, so pounds per square inch of bearing pressure on the surface of a pervious paver system. The actual fire truck is an 80,000-pound fire truck, and when you spread that weight out across the stabilizers, the bearing pressure of that truck is on the order of 150 to depending on where the ladder is, 150 to maybe 300 PSI. So these systems are designed to handle far an extent of what a fire truck or a trash truck or any type of big vehicle can put on it. And that's just the grass paved system. The pervious pavers, like the Belgard systems that are concrete blocks that are separated, they're designed to withstand a bearing pressure of on the order of 8,000 PSI. So system-wise, the pervious paver system, whichever one we pick, will certainly be able to handle the bearing pressure of the fire apparatus. And we've added a note here on the plan that says, proposed 25-foot wide pervious paver or grass paved fire lane, final product must be approved by the Abington Fire Chief. So we want to make sure that this isn't something we're just going to put down without the approval or weigh-in from town officials. And when it comes to the fire lane marker, we were proposing a fence. So it's a solid fence. So no matter how much snow, you're going to see a solid fence there. And it will be, that system will be installed up beyond the fence. So there's no chance that the fire apparatus would drive beyond it. And we did show a full 25-foot wide fire lane. And our fire truck turning plan did show that that particular fire truck, which is the most impactful fire truck, could easily make that turning movement.
would that require on both ends to have some sort of striping down that says fire lane do not block, so that there's no one in front of that?
Likely, yes, it could, yes.
Well-
And what, you know, it would have to be a maintained type of system, so it would be plowed in the winter. It's not something that's gonna be gated, we'd leave it open. And again, that's something, though, if the fire chief wanted it gated, we could certainly have it gated with fire department knock boxes for access. But I think the intent in our discussions was we'd leave it open, and just part of the landscaping contract, it would have to be maintained.
Anyone else on the board?
I have a question, but I'd like to stay with the fire engine.
Yeah, if folks don't mind, I'd like to start with Chief Nuttall, because we seem to be doing an awful lot of comments about the fire, so Chief, please.
Thanks. Actually, so my question would be, and thank you for describing the strength of what that product would be, which would be for the tower truck, certainly. But the other issue would be is, even if we just get a medical emergency in one of these units at any time, whether it's winter, summer, whatever, we'll pick the worst-case scenario. We have a foot of snow, and somebody's having a heart attack right here at 2 o'clock in the morning, which is actually a realistic scenario. We would be driving along here. Hopefully that would be maintained as well. 'Cause in order to access any of these units in here, otherwise we're parked here and we're walking the stretcher. It's hard to tell here. Are these walkways or?
These are sidewalks.
Okay.
These are sidewalks with entrances at every unit, front and back.
And what's the length of this building? I can't see it from just looking for a ballpark.
So, the full length of the building from end to end is 250 feet.
Okay, so for us to, park the apparatus here, and then if we have to walk the stretcher here, that's quite a lengthy period of time, as opposed to just us parking right here. Like every other development in town, we literally pull up to the front door or or the back door, whether it's Thayer Street, the Woodlands, Avon, all of the other ones. This is unique in that realistically, if this is grass, we're parking here or here, and we're going to be walking in here to get to it. We really don't have anything else in town like that. Around here, to get to these units, we'd be blocking this main street. Hopefully that there's access in here, I'm not quite sure. It's just a little difficult just even getting regular access every day, not just the big fire, God forbid, where we have to position the fire apparatus, but just the everyday medical emergencies, or if there's a water leak here, or what have you. If we have to access any of these units, they're a little bit tight to get to. So that was a question. So this would have to be maintained all the time. The other question, this is pavement back here? Okay. Is there a reason you're not doing just pavement here?
We're trying to keep the pervious number as low as possible.
I'll defer to the town's engineers on that. And my other question was, since we did spend a lot of time, you explained the turning apparatus plan with that, and there's been a few changes. Have you had a chance to look at that, sir?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you speak in that in a moment, so, because I know that there were quite a few tight spots on that, and you may have addressed it. I haven't seen it since then, to really kind of gauge how that is. But my concern, again, is just making sure we get access to these, for the residents who are here. That's a long haul to get, the stretcher and everything here and then back. That's fairly far from our equipment, to have to walk that whole way as opposed to driving right up to it.
Jeff, would
Do you have any
you?
other questions, Jeff?
Not regarding the fire, no. As long as you had seen the plan and had also reviewed it.
Ask Jeff Rudirk, who's our Vanessa Associates, our traffic consultant, to weigh in, please.
Sure. So just focusing on the fire truck apparatus, and we had the same concerns relative to the access to the buildings that the chief had expressed, but specifically with regard to the truck turn. So the apparatus that they'd shown was able to make it around the majority of the lots, I would suggest. It is contingent upon the fire chief being comfortable with being able to circulate around. I think that's building E. Is that building? So the concern with that access, I mean, aside from the, assuming that the structural integrity and everything you described is sufficient to support the emergency vehicle, is really, it's what you were talking about, which is maintaining it at all times. And it needs to be traversable, so I'm assuming it's not going to be multiple curb. It's got to be something that's flush. So we need to differentiate the fact, as you were alluding to, that it's fire access or emergency access only. But I think from the standpoint of accessing the buildings, it's going to get used on a regular basis if that's the only way to get in there. And I think the typical thing is be able to get right to the front of the units, and that's not going to be accomplished, I think, with either of the building layouts there. But that aside, to defer to the chief, obviously, in terms of how they would attack either a fire or an emergency call at the buildings. So the issues with respect to the truck turning analysis, I think, is the first thing is the reserved parking area that they've described. So to the extent that the chief would like to be able to get the vehicle and circulate within that 52 lot parking area, the turning analysis shows the vehicle can get in, but if you look at where they kind of stop the vehicle, if you progress it to get back out, it would drive through all the parking spaces. So that lot, I think, needs to be looked at in a little bit more detail. You can get in, but I think the loop around, it can't do that. So that's would eliminate some of those parking spaces just to begin with. So if you look at the truck turning analysis, you'll show the truck gets in, but then picture it continuing to loop back out, and you'd see it can't do that.
Which one?
So if you look at sheet 8,
Yep.
so if you look at sheet 8 and just focus on that area there, you can see the truck nicely gets in there, but then just picture it now proceeding to exit, and it's.
Which lot, I'm sorry?
It's right here.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So you can see the truck gets in there, but then picture it now
Yeah.
trying to make the turn to get out, and
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
see it can't do that. So there'll be some loss of spaces in that lot, or some reconfiguration, I shouldn't say loss of spaces, potentially looking at reconfiguration there. But I think, again, getting back to the area behind Building E, one of the things that we had asked them to look at as well was, they've shown some dumpster pad areas there, so we need to see how a truck gets to those dumpster pad areas, and if you focus on the dumpster pad area down at Building E, so the truck is either going to, if it's a head in, so it's gonna drive straight down, lift and dump the trash, it's gonna have to back all the way out. So I think we start to look at practicality of how, now that it's a dead-end parking aisle essentially, except the emergency vehicle can get through, it starts not to be able to function from the standpoint of, the dumpster area there. Need to look at not only the emergency access, but how do we service the dumpster recycling down there? Because it does require, the vehicle's gonna have to back all the way down or back all the way out. And that again gets us back to what does the treatment behind the building wanna be, and does it need to be, something that's usable, even if it's just in a one-way direction and it's 20 feet wide, just to have it function in the manner that I think the applicant intends it to be.
You folks have a response to that?
Yeah, so I want to talk first about the reserved parking area. This parking area, there's no structures there, there's no residence, there's no houses. It's a parking lot, and I don't know the specific fire code reference, but the total width of this parking lot is about 150 feet. So any type of emergency in this parking area, it meets all of the driveway requirements of your zoning bylaws. They're 25 feet wide, all the parking spaces are the same. Because of the tight constraints of what we're limited to here in wetlands, we would need a much wider parking area for a fire truck of this size to make the full turnaround to get in and out. And the fire code reference that I'm referring to says that a fire truck is you're allowed to consider a truck pulling in and backing out if it's less than 150 feet of travel way, which we have way less than that here. So if a fire did happen on a vehicle here, a truck could pull in and fight a fire anywhere in this area. I don't want to tell the fire chief how to fight a fire, that's not my intent here. I just want to show you that the proximity, if a fire truck stopped in Moynihan Way to fight a fire, they're less than 100 feet from all the parking spaces, they could pull in and fight it anywhere from these parking spaces and be able to back out. Because of the tight constraints here, this truck of this size simply cannot make the turn. But it can make the full maneuver around the rest of the site where there are residential structures.
Chief, did you have a comment?
There's a lot of what-ifs there. Your drawing is based on the longest vehicle we have, which is the tower truck, which is 48 feet long.
Yes.
Ideally, we would not be using that truck for a car fire. However, realistically, there are times that's the truck, the only one that's available on the road. And that may be tasked with having to take care of that. Even though we would not prefer that, sometimes that's the reality.
Do you pull a hose out when you put the fire out? If you have a car fire, do you pull a hose, or is that chemically put out?
Fire hose. And again, the tower truck's not ideal because it only has 300 gallons. The engines have 750. There would be an engine coming to it eventually, but if the engines are tied up, the tower truck happened to be there, there are times that truck is push fuel and whatever. Just by the nature of how the calls go. So again, to get $1 million truck, a almost $5 million truck at this point, caught in over a car fire, if that was the case, because we can't get it back out, that's a tough hit for the town. But right now, we don't have that issue.
All right, I'm going to open this up. Chief, you set for right
Well,
now?
I'm sorry, I mean, there may be a few things that people have questions about that I'm going to ask about. One is, I want to talk about lighting, but right now, about the landscaping on a smaller scale. When you come off Summer Street, the wetlands to the right-hand side is pretty much left is not touched. And then it's built up, and we have the parking lot up there, and I think there's some trees. Is that, what's proposed exactly on the hill rise behind the parking lot?
Up on this side?
Yeah, yeah. What will you see from Summer Street when you look across the wetlands?
So from Summer Street, the view you see right now it will remain untouched to about, I'd say, 15 feet behind this proposed parking area. So whatever's out there now, we're not modifying. It's wetlands, we can't impact that.
You have retaining soils there, though?
No. That will back here up to the edge of parking on this particular site down here, where it's maybe 3 feet, 3 feet of fill down in this area. And that's all.
No, on the opposite side, in front of the parking we were just talking about, that's surrounded in a retaining wall. It looks to be about 6 feet tall.
It is.
What I want to know is kind of how, is it going to be allowed to grow wild in front of it, or what's that going to look like when it starts growing, everything starts growing around it?
So landscape-wise over here, we'd be clearing almost up to the property line, which is pretty close to the edge of pavement, the right-of-way here on Summer Street. So it would remain basically what's left over there after what we regrade, but we are proposing some landscaping just within the lot, nothing too drastic or too big over here.
I would appreciate if you could add to that a detail for that area so that you can choose some plants that won't be invasive, but that can grow there and just maybe take over
You're talking outside of
along the
this?
front before it just becomes all weeds. I mean, weeds are going to grow there anyway, but I think if the background plants, whatever, you don't have to be anything substantial, just.
Just for screening for that particular lot?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes,
on
good.
that point, the parking, there's a provision that parking shall not be located in the front yard area, and I don't see any setbacks on this parking area.
Yeah, we don't have a parking setback shown, and I mean, proximity here, we probably, at its closest point, we're at about almost 20 feet.
Maybe the best thing would be to drop that row of spaces, because then it also helps solve your fire engine problem.
That's what I was getting.
Yeah, that solves the issue of the setbacks and the fire engine turning radius. You're gonna lose some parking spaces, but you'll allow the chief to get his big ladder truck in there and eliminate the issue that our attorney has just raised. I think that would be, I think that would be a good suggestion.
Okay.
We're very comfortable with the amount of parking that's there.
Well, we mentioned about the concrete pads for the dumpsters. General comment is they're a hike to walk to from your residence. And, I mean, it's a hike just for me to walk to my driveway with all the crap I carry outside. But one thing I don't see is that there's no place where there might be a central location for recycling. All this is all trash. And imagine, there's only room, looks like there's only room for one dumpster on those pads, but maybe I'm wrong because it's such a small scale on the drawing.
They're 24 foot wide by 15, so
24 foot, see?
That's
So
two
you put two
dumpsters.
beside each other?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we do have available, I mean, we could add, you know, in the same location, we could add one over here, we could add some in the middle. There is some space over here where we could add more, but we're trying not to, you know, put too many around these residential structures.
One small thing, and then I'll talk about the lighting. I see one power transformer on the property. It's over by Building D, and it's surrounded, it's in the middle of the lawn, and it's called to have bollards around it, and then the landscape shows landscaping all around it. I didn't know if there's more transformer things, but nothing ruins a development like a transformer sitting on the ground, surrounded by bollards. I was just wondering if there's something, if you have I can't read it because the scale's very small, but whether or not there's a better way to screen it or another location for it. You see the transformer I'm talking on the north side of D?
Yeah, we do show
What page is that on, Joe?
sheet 5. So we show a transformer to the north side of Building D.
Yeah.
We show one on the southwest corner of Building A. So basically, at each block of building, we're proposing 3 transformers.
Okay. Yeah, if it can have a detail where, don't treat it just like a utility. I don't know how far away when you have to put bollards in it to stop it from being hit by a car.
Yep.
But, you know, if we could dispense with that and make it with some kind of a colored screen or something around it just to screen it from view.
The utility company's gonna dictate that more than anything.
Yeah, well, they won't do the landscaping for you, though. That's the problem, is you leave the utility companies, and that's why you find them every damn place where you don't want them. It's like, that was gonna be my comment about the gas meters. You have gas meters on the side of the building, and
Yep.
they're never a nice-looking thing. Typically, what I've done at other places, boxing them in with some sort of a doghouse built on the side.
You know, we do show, like, with there's landscaping around where this transformer's going. You know, we have landscaping. We have at the corner here where we showed one for the big building. And then the other transformer we had over, at the corner of Building C, it could certainly, we could certainly just have, it could easily be a condition about screening.
Just give it a detail to it so that it doesn't just get left to the, then it gets surrounded by sand and no one finishes it.
Sir, just for Mrs. Shea's note taking, could you identify
Oh,
yourself?
sorry, Patrick, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
The lighting around the place, I think you've got a fixture that, well, lighting-wise, what I would suggest is the poles are 14 feet tall, and they're a circular fixture which gives it 180 degrees of light coming down the pole. 180 degrees? 360 degrees around the pole, with no room for cutoff. In looking at a lot of this, and I marked up a sheet here for myself just to get an idea what I was talking about. Right now, they're 14 feet tall, they're paced about 80 feet apiece. That if they were shorter and closer to maybe 50 or 60 feet between each one, that you could, use an additional post in some cases, but lower the height above the ground to maybe, the 12-foot range or the 10-foot range. And that, what I see the pattern that you use to lay out, the pattern that they use to lay the lighting out. On the, there's got, want to have a consistency of glow for this site, and it's bad enough it's going to glow, but I think with these lights they're proposing they've got a decent lamp in it, but they're not, typically now they use the hammerhead sticking out off a pole, and they're very thin, they're LED lights. This is just a circular one. With those ones, they give you a chance to put a guard on the back side or whatever side you want to attach to. Do they have the surround ones? I don't know.
I mean, we
Okay.
could, if you have a preference for lighting, it can easily be changed.
No, the project's, you're putting a lot of good feet forward, but that light fixture, just for that one thing, kind of looks like, I don't know what it looks like. A hoe, looks like an upside-down garden hoe. But if, I think you want to find, not something like this, that's my only opinion, the antique lights that I see around town, I wouldn't waste any money on those. But something that's a little dressier than just this stick going up, I don't know what it is, but maybe just another fixture that's probably just more common.
We could certainly provide you something or options.
But I'd like you to look at closer lighting on that. What is the lighting on the buildings themselves? I don't see any notes about wall packs or lighting off the buildings. Are they just going to
We
be?
didn't provide any of that detail, so we didn't spec any wall packs for these buildings. I'm sure there's going to be architectural elements where they'll have
Yeah, that's
something at the
what-
walkways and at the entrances and things like that, but
Yeah,
for the lighting plan here specifically shows the poles throughout to make sure we meet the.
primary for the parking.
But the bylaw requires ground level lighting.
And there is.
It says ground level lighting required.
Well, there's awnings around the big building also. I imagine might be lit up from underneath or such and such, but I wondered if that was proposed at all. Did you look at any lighting around that building?
We can add,
All right.
we can add bollard lighting through around the walkways
Yeah,
and.
mainly what I'm looking for mainly is fixtures that you can't see the element, regardless of the lumens, just so you can't see the light bulb. Just so you know, this is about an 18-foot high ceiling, so about 14 feet is somewhere around that television. And that's where they're talking about now, and I'm talking about lowering another 4 feet or so from below that, just to try to get the sight line down so you're not looking up into the fixture. I think that was basically it. The signage, that's going to be done, that's separate, like we said in the package, that's going to be done during the permitting.
Yep.
So that will take care of the street sign for the project, I guess, imagine it'll have a name, and those signs going into the lot. I think that was it, no, I think that's it. Wetland retail. I would say that I am pleased that I don't think we knew what we thought we'd see when someone proposed to build this area out here. It's a nice balance of wetlands and the buildings and the retail. And I'm glad that there's a commitment to the retail. Because that would have just killed this whole deal. If it looked like the retail could be easily fitted out to be a residential piece in any way, then that's what we sort of really had to have a retail look to it. So that's why this
That
one.
was my comment. I know you folks originally wanted to do this 100% residential, and in this conversation that we've been having since June, I've always stressed that the town originally approved this as a transit-oriented development district with the provision that, be commercial, have a commercial element. We haven't rendered a decision. I'm just making an observation that I'm pleased that there's 6,000 square feet of space, commercial space. And we haven't rendered a decision. That's just a personal observation. All right. Anyone else? All right. I'm going to thank you very much for your patience. I'm going to open this up for public comment again. If you would just give your name, please, and address.
Karen Bowman on Plymouth Street, you can hear me, don't worry about the back. Okay, now I'm seeing Summer Street on the very right, and there's a sidewalk that goes along there. How far is that parking lot to the sidewalk? How much of that space are you taking up, and are you going to be rearranging the width of Moynihan with the existing sidewalks?
No, the existing sidewalks along Moynihan are staying exactly as they are.
Okay, when I walk down the sidewalk and I take a look to the left where Progress Street is, I can see everybody's backyard windows. So how far from the sidewalk is the building? How wide is the building, and how far from the back of the building to these people's property is going to be?
This building to Moynihan, to Progress Street?
Yeah.
So the current plan shows we are at least, I would say, probably 60 feet to the property line from the building. And then however far from the property line on Progress Street to the houses is, it is what it is.
Now, originally, when you had one of the first meetings, you said you were going to be putting a big stockade fence up to protect the people on Progress Street.
Yes.
And one of the people said, what's going to be behind there? And you said dumpsters.
So
So the dumpsters are going to be in these people's backyard.
well, the dumpsters are on this property. They're not in their property.
In these people's backyard.
As we're proposing it now, we used to have a driveway back here with parking spaces all along. We had a retaining wall behind their property line, which is all allowed by zoning. And the revised plan now has eliminated all the parking spaces that were back here. It eliminated the driveway. It's going to remain pervious back there, so we're maintaining about a 20-foot wide landscape buffer, which is existing out there now. We'll maintain at least 20 feet of that to the extent of our grading. And then we are proposing just something like a split rail fence, but we just discussed tonight that the abutters would like more privacy, be it a privacy fence with vegetation and other trees and plantings, which we've agreed to. So there will be more of a buffer than what we show on this plan now. And as being new screening, new plantings, it's going to be solid pines or whatever, I guess, exists out there today.
Any additional parking lot that you want to build?
Mhm.
As I walk down there and go towards the sewage building,
Yes.
whatever it is, the highway department building, okay, that entire corner right there is all wet.
Yep.
So how far are you going to stay away from that?
So we know that. We have, these wetlands are flagged. So it's up here. It was delineated back in, I guess, 2018. We obtained an ORAD, it's called, and it's an Order of Resource Area Delineation. So we flagged the wetlands. Our wetland consultant walked the entire property with the Conservation Commission, and the Conservation Commission bought into these flags and the extent of these wetlands that are here. So these wetlands are being maintained. We are filling an isolated wetland that's up here on the other side, but we're providing the replication that's required by the Wetland Protection Act. So this is all a permittable and allowed impact. So down on this side, if we do build out this reserve lot, we are proposing to build this within, some parts of it within 10 feet of the wetland, but it's a retaining wall. And this is an impact. Everything that's proposed here, once we if we get planning board approval moving forward, we do have to go to conservation to ask for their approval. So what we're showing, we know is a permittable impact. It's allowed by the Wetland Protection Act, so we're not proposing anything here that we outright know is not allowed. So after we finalize the process here with planning board, we'll move forward with conservation.
Now, do you own the property where the T station is right now? Is that part of your property?
No.
So how are these people gonna go in and out? Are they gonna cut through the T station, or are they gonna come out to Summer Street?
What do you mean
All
by that?
residents, how are they gonna get out of their little village?
They drive with up and down Monahan Crossing, which is going to remain,
Summer Street.
Summer Street or through the parking area, yep. And then we have the sidewalk connections up and down Monahan right now that they can maintain. We're also proposing one walkway connection up here closer to the tracks.
And then too, I know there's another development going in down by me that has 144 units, and if I recall wrong, please counsel correct me, when we were talking about the traffic flow for this particular one, it's 144 units, and you said there'd be close to 600 transports going in and out of there on any given day.
Honestly, I don't remember the exact number, but
If that's the case,
that was going on.
on Plymouth Street. So, and you've got more units, and you're gonna have more parking, so how many trips are gonna be going in and out of there on Summer Street? And you can't cut through this. Why do you keep having crashes and then all that?
I don't know the trips, I don't have the number, but we,
Follow the traffic, and so would everybody else in here too, because it's all.
well, it was studied. We do have a traffic consultant. The traffic report was provided.
I'm going to direct this question to Mr. Dirk, our traffic engineer. Jeff, could you address this, please?
Sure. So if a traffic report was provided, we have not seen it. So
I thought it was in here. I thought it was in the,
not specific to this project. I provided some traffic estimates for this site because there was not a traffic study provided from the project. So we, based on the current development proposal, and again, I'm the town's consultant, not their consultant. So we've estimated that the project will produce somewhere around 100 peak hour trips. So each of the peak hours on a weekday, the morning between 7 and 9, and the evening between 4 and 6, and then on Saturday between 1 and 2. So the highest traffic volume hour will be somewhere around 100 peak hours. The majority of it is going to go on Summer Street, but there will be a portion of it that's going to go through the commuter lot and into the north, Park Street. And that's just, the connectivity is there, and there's nothing that says that they can't do it. But we expect the majority of it is going to hit on Summer Street.
so,
Only 100 cars a
During a 1 hour period.
1 hour.
For a 1 hour period. Over the course of the day, it'll be closer to about 1,500, 24 hours.
Those peak hours are school hours with the 7, 8, 9 buses that go up and down the streets too.
Yes, exactly. It's a residential project, so these are commuters, and they're gonna be driving during the commuter peak hours, so somewhere 7 to 9 in the morning, there's gonna be a peak, and then in the evening, there'll be a peak somewhere between 4 and 6.
And could you repeat your name and address, please? I'm sorry.
Karen Bowen, Plymouth Street.
Thank you. Oh, the other ones.
John Feedy, Summer Street.
so, Mr. Dirk,
They already passed the bus, it says it is.
the letter that we have from you that talks about it, this,
The table 1. On
Right.
the second page.
so it says traffic engineering peer review, but this doesn't qualify as a traffic study, or they didn't submit a official traffic study? They gave us traffic numbers based on counts Bruce did.
They never, so to be clear, a traffic study was never submitted for this project. Bruce provided some background traffic numbers for existing traffic volumes on the roadway. But unlike what is typically provided, where the applicant produces a traffic study and estimates volume of traffic and impacts associated with development, that was never provided for the project. So as a part of our review, we provided some information, so the planning board would at least have some information, and using Bruce's data, because.
And I just want to clarify this. The Old Colony
The Old
Planning,
Colony
the Old
Planning
Colony, I work for the Old Colony Planning Council, okay? But, and this is anyway, but Old Colony Planning Council did a traffic study on Summer Street last year. And I just happened to do the turning movement counts, but we put out machines. We counted the 3 intersections, Bedford Street, the middle, and on 58. And I personally did those TMCs, but we also had turning movement counts, speaking English first. And we also had traffic recorders, which record, I think, for a 72-hour period, So we got the truck volumes and all that stuff. But that's the study, Old Colony Planning Council. Bruce Hughes didn't do the study. Old Colony Planning Council.
So, and that's a great clarification, it's just base traffic, but there has not been a traffic study conducted for the project. However, based on the data from the Old Colony Planning Council, and obviously we can estimate traffic for projects, you know, we took the combination of estimating the volume of traffic, looking at the historic traffic counts that we've done in the area, and then looked at what the impact of this project may be relative to delays, queuing, and overall increase in traffic volume. So that's what we've done. But again, you know, we provide some background information so we have it. The applicant has never submitted a traffic study for this project.
Okay.
All right, I guess I'll go on the left. Ma'am, please.
When was that traffic study that Old Colony did? Because living on Summer Street, I saw them doing it during the summer.
Yeah.
I'm very concerned about the buses. I've watched the cars already fly by the buses. When the stop signs are out and the lights are blinking. So do you know when that one was done? Because I've seen them do it during the summer, not during the school peak hours.
It was June 2019. Yeah.
So when school got out. So the peak hours are a lot less without 9 buses going up and down Summer Street. Because those are the hours that all the school buses, the high school, the middle school, the elementary schools, and now we have the VOTEC bus coming down now too this year.
Adding a couple buses to that overall traffic volume is not gonna really change the overall volume of traffic.
But another 100 and then another 144 people on my
yes.
street, that's gonna add a lot.
Correct. I don't disagree with you on that.
And I have an 8-year-old that gets on a bus.
Okay, I'll start with the next lady to move
Bernie
into.
Cronin, 458 Summer Street. I have a number of questions, but the first one is, it seems to me that a lot of the problems that you're having in approving this, and figuring out the traffic study, figuring out the fire department requirements, putting the dumpster, all of these issues are because this project is really too big for the space that you are trying to put it in. And that's where so many of the issues are coming up. To go from 165 to 150, there's really no change at all in terms of the scope of the project. Sorry, you're losing my voice here. But I think that's really something that no one's addressed. Why are we putting 150 units in a very small area and trying to squeeze it in? And truthfully, this whole retail thing, I think is pie in the sky, because we have blank places all over town that are still not being taken care of. So you could approve a residential project with a retail component, and it could be empty for the next 10 years. So it seems that this is just a little bit too much for this space.
Half the space and jack up the rent.
Well, we could conceivably put a condition of approval that, as a condition of approval, if this thing is, if we get this far, that the spaces would be, you know, filled. Did you want to have a chance to answer? No, okay, no, it's all right. I'll move on to the next one. Ma'am, please.
Hi, Pam Muirhead, 1026 Plymouth Street. My concern about this traffic is the traffic studies are all based on the current situation. You have 144 units coming in across the street from me, and now 150 or 165. They're both coming at us at the same time. And there's no way of planning or estimating this project's going to be done at this time and then do a traffic study encompassing all of this traffic that's coming at us all at the same time. I mean, the situation is already pathetic out there.
Sir, please.
Paul Redmore, 60 Summer Street. So I want to disagree about one thing respectfully. That I don't think the project is too big for this, for what you're proposing, but I know that you're trying to maximize space. The problem that I think is the bigger condition is the space won't accommodate the access in and out of it. That's the biggest problem in this whole picture. We have kids we're raising in these areas. We have enough trouble where we do have sidewalks, where we don't have sidewalks. That's going to be, especially closer to the train station, where people are jutting in and out and trying to cut people off to get into these driveways, it becomes problematic. It becomes a high-risk hazard for everybody that lives on Summer Street, Progress Street, Walnut Street, Center Street, and every surrounding street. We're at risk. Our families are at risk. My wife and I walk Summer Street regularly. And we are on that side. If we're walking towards 58 and someone's cutting in or trying to cut someone off, before they block the man, it's a safety risk for everybody in the area. That is the concern of everybody here. It's not that we don't want you to have your development and your project. We have to look at where we live and what's important for the needs of our families. And there are just as many families surrounding that development as that will be living in it. And we know you guys have jobs to do and everything else. We respect that you're trying to make all these changes and everything. It doesn't change the fact the project is too big for accessibility. Maybe not for the space, but for the access. Until there's a real study done about how this impacts our day-to-day lives, I see it as being a huge problem, not to put them there, but for people to access in and out. And every time we come here for another meeting, there are questions that still aren't answered. We've been doing this for a long time, and there's still no traffic study based on this project being in place. If you live on Summer Street and you are dealing with the morning and afternoon commuters, and now to add this on top of it, two things I've read religiously since we started this project. Something's going to get built there. We all know that. Does it have to be this? Probably not. And the second thing I was told was, no, most of these people will be commuters on the train. I don't believe that. The people from the Woodlands are whipping in and out every morning and every afternoon. We are looking out for our own health and safety for our families. It's not that we don't want you to do your job. It's not that we don't want you to have what you want. But you're not looking at the big scale picture of how people are going to get in and out of here safely when we are trying to walk our animals, take our kids out for a walk or whatever. That's what matters.
They have their own driveways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I'm Jackie Collins. I live on Temple Street in Abington. And it's my understanding that these types of projects that are built around transportation, that the residents of these places tend to be commuters. They tend to want to live there. I mean, that's what I've seen.
Not from the Woodlands.
Well, I don't really know too much about the buildings. I mean,
It's across the street from the train station.
On Summer Street.
On Summer Street. And the people coming in and out of there on a regular basis, they're not heading to the train station.
so, but that's not a mixed-use type of area, is
No,
it?
no, it's all residential.
It's all right.
Right across the
So
street.
this is more of a
It's
mixed
like 10
use.
feet from where they want to be.
So I'm just questioning, because I'm just saying, I've been involved in a lot of meetings and around development and projects on the South Shore, because I'm interested in economic development. So this project interests me because I'm an Abington resident, and from an economic development standpoint, there's a lot of things that make sense about it. So I've looked at other areas and I've done my homework to look at what's happening with these other projects on the South Shore that are mixed use on transportation lines. And what I've read and people that I've talked to say that those are folks that tend to move there specifically because they want easy access to commuter rails. So that's,
But talk to the people outside of those communities that surround those communities. You're going to get a much different response than I have. You can't talk to people just in those communities. You have to talk to people outside and how it impacts their lives.
Right. I don't like to point my finger.
Lisa Richardson, 94 Carver Street. So to elaborate on that point, living on Carver Street in the Woodlands, there, we don't have maintained sidewalks on Carver Street. And the Woodland residents do tend to live up and down. We call the police department regularly to come sit on our street to because we're concerned about the safety of our kids. There's a lot of young children on that street. So, and the other thing that happens is the Summer Street is 40 miles per hour, and people go 50. So we tend to try to cross the street to enjoy our neighborhood and are at risk of getting hit quite a few times trying to cross at the crosswalk. So I think there's some town issues that need to be addressed if we're going to be putting more residents in that area, because it's not really facilitating the community that we're talking about putting in there. So safety of streets, speed, and that sort of thing aren't really being considered outside of the property. And I'd like to take a look at that, because also with the parking restrictions, it would be nice to think that everyone would be commuting and perhaps have one car, but moving from the city to this type of area, you tend to need 2 cars if you have a family. So I'd be very surprised if we would be able to fit that type of thing without proper management. And we have no restriction on parking on Progress Street. So I imagine there would be a pretty high likelihood of an overflow of parkers on our street. I'm really not interested in having a bunch of strangers parking on my street every day. So I'm with the safety of families and really looking at it from that standpoint. I come from living in the city. I don't mind having this type of thing, but the other consideration on ours, so you guys talk about putting 20 feet between the properties. So 94 Progress Street actually abuts that parking lot that's jutting out and the fire lane there. No, so other way. So the parking lot where you guys are moving the wetlands. Described to me that the wetlands are being moved behind my property, but it's actually half of that is true, and then there's a parking lot that goes 20 feet to my property. So I'm really interested to see the land that's very close to where my family is placed in the backyard. So we're looking at safety concerns and people cutting through that sort of thing. I have talked to some of the developers. They did come stop by the house, and we talked about some fencing plans and that sort of thing. But I think we really want to kind of see those details at some point and be able to weigh in.
Let's see, I'm gonna pick. Man, I'll let you go again, please. Yes.
To safety and all of those issues you were talking about are very important. And it's my feeling, and I've done some research about development projects in other places, and there are very often community mitigation proposals, so that we could ask, could they put a sidewalk all the way up to Walnut Street? Could there be a real crosswalk? Could there be a light? There's now a 10-unit apartment across the street. You have people going across the street to the dog park, to the senior center. I walk the neighborhood also. I mean, there are just so many safety issues. And if the town of Abington can't afford to handle all of those, if we approve a project, it seems to me that we should be requiring as much as we can from the developers.
Chief, I'll let you comment again, please.
I'm just going to come up here if you don't mind. Do you mind if I put this illustration up? This is a great illustration. And again, this goes back to my concern, and I'm glad I'm hearing from all the residents. It's not just me talking my concerns here, but again, my concern with the access to those areas, I'll take it down again for a minute, to get to these buildings here. These ones aren't as bad, but especially here. And I'm assuming this looks almost like we're looking right down that alleyway from one of these parking lots. Is that what this is supposed to be?
Yeah.
And this is perfect, because this is what we're going to see. Although the difference is, and there's one car here, which we'll never see, because whether it's the Woodlands, Thayer Street, Forsyth Drive, any of the other ones, Divina, 24 hours a day, this is going to be full of cars, because these are all the parking spaces. So if we have, whether it be a fire or just a medical emergency way down here, and we're pulling the apparatus of the ambulance up to here, realistically, this is gonna be full of cars, and it looks like there may be a walkway here that's maintained, but wherever we're at, usually it's tough to get through all of those parked cars. The ambulance stretcher is about 32 inches wide, that's not gonna fit between two parked cars. But either way, even if we're able to get through here, and now we have to walk pretty much the length of Thayer Street. Not everybody in town is gonna be familiar with the size of Thayer Street. That's the condominiums behind Lowe's, if you go in that loop, those long buildings. And those are great, great units. And we're able to access the complete front of those, on all of those buildings. We can literally go to the front door on every one of those buildings, as opposed to trying to hit those front doors from the end, as we're gonna have to do here. We have no other development anywhere like this in town. The only one I can even conceive that's similar, that we have a long walkway, is Building 8, 56 Townsend Street, but even that, we can go around the back if we had to. Every other development in town, we're able to pull up to the front. And I keep hearing, they're great commuter locations in the cities, or whatnot. We're not Quincy, we're not Braintree, certainly not Boston and Cambridge. We have 2 firefighter paramedics on our apparatus, not 4. So again, this is changing how we're gonna be operating, whether it's a medical emergency bringing that down, God forbid it's a fire, hopefully we can get through there, because to try to stretch a hose line, and these are 3-story buildings, this is not Thayer Street by any means. Thayer Street is a 1.5-story, single unit height building lengthwise. These are 3-story units, these are large buildings. And even on this rendering, it does look small compared to the large building. I agree with the residents that we're not opposed to you putting something here, but you're cramming so much in such a constricted area that it really affects how we're able to possibly get the apparatus around. And I know theoretically we can, but there's no room for error. And that error could be something as simple as somebody decides they're gonna put a plow in front of their pickup truck and park it right here, and now we can't get past it. Or somebody's gonna stop and park here for a minute, or whatever. Or maybe our driver's new and we're trying to thread that needle going through. Or winter, or what have you. There is zero room for error for us to even try to get around that. And that's not even the ladder truck, even the ambulance. The ambulance is wider than the ladder truck. I'm just as concerned with the width as well as the length on this. And you've tried, I've met with both of you, you're trying to do it, but the reality is, this is such a congested, tight development for what we have. I can see this being problematic for years, that we're all gonna be stuck with this. You may sell this and move on. We've got this forever as a community, and we have to deal with this. It won't be me, but the firefighters, after this is built at some point, this is here forever. And we still have developments in town that are much wider than this, and we're still busy with it. We find to get our way around it. This is so much more compact than anything else we have in this town. And that's my concern. I'm not sure if legally there's anything we can do with it, but that's my concern with how we're gonna operate with this if it goes through.
So, Chief, just to be clear, while you're up there, hypothetically, there's a fire in the front of Building D, which is the 2 on the, yeah.
Yep.
So, let's say it's in the inside where the landscaping is. So right now, the concern is because we have significant landscaping between the buildings, you couldn't drive a vehicle there.
Correct.
You'd have to be pulling hoses 100 feet.
We carry we carry hundreds of feet of hose, but our attack lines, basically, we have pre-connected 150 feet and 200 foot attack lines. We can go much larger with the others, but that takes a lot more time. We're actually taking it off the hose bed in the back. We have to disconnect it. It's not just take the hose and go quickly, which is what we do. So realistically, 200 feet attack line from here, we're using a lot of that up depending on where we're at. We don't have those issues now.
So hypothetically, if it was reworked so there was one main access sidewalk or pathway between the two, wide enough for apparatus, that you can, pull in and pull out of, does that make it more feasible?
And at one point we did talk about that. If we're able to drive through here, problem's kind of solved. That brings us back to pretty much every other development we have in town.
And then move
These
this,
are also three-story, that's not even taken, that 200-foot attack lane is not taken into account, it could be up on the third floor. That's adding even more to that. I mean, that's a major fire, obviously, we have that, and the resources are coming, but to get that initial attack line in place, because these units, correct me if I'm wrong, these are townhouse-type units, just three-story townhouses, as opposed to this, which is gonna be just a large, common hallways, standpipe systems, and what have you. I'm assuming they're not gonna be in these units. These are just townhouse units that are either 2 or 3 stories tall, or am I wrong?
No, they're all fully sprinkled.
I'm not talking sprinklers, we still have fires in sprinkler buildings.
Right.
Look at the Woodlands, we've had many of them. There still have to be fire hoses in here. So there will be, in here, there will be standpipes. A standpipe is a fire connection, like out in the hall, we can attach a hose to it. We're not gonna have them in these buildings, I'm assuming.
Because they're all individual, you would not.
Correct.
Yeah.
So basically, each one of these is a 3-story home connected to each other.
That's correct.
That's what we're dealing with.
I'm going to let Mrs. Howe ask a question, please.
Yeah, I'm not one on Wall Street. Chief, I have just, if you could comment on where you're saying to get into those buildings, they have to go like 100 feet to even get there. If somebody's having a stroke or a heart attack or a medical emergency, just those couple of minutes that it's gonna take for them to have to get a stretcher all the way down. I mean, that's somebody's life you're talking about, if they can't just pull right up and get right up to a unit.
It is time, that's my concern. If you know, if for some reason we can't come through here, or parking lot here, now, you know, for us to get here, assuming that there's doors on this side of the street side of the building, which a lot of times, we don't have good access to that. I'm not sure what the back of these buildings are, whether it's a deck or what it's gonna be, but as opposed to the front door, most often everybody uses their front door, they don't always have clear access to their back door, just because that's how people live.
So Chief, if we did have standpipes in for those units, would that?
I think we still have to get close to it. I mean, the real key is if you could have it drive up to the bit, then it's a problem solved. It's a redesign, and I know at one point we kind of talked about that, widening these up a bit, but if we could somehow drive through there, that really solves the problem, and this brings us back on par with every other development we have, not only in this area, but not only in this town, but really for the area.
Chief, are there fire hydrants proposed on
Yes.
top of
Yeah, there's hydrants around, but it's us physically getting into each unit from, you know, that's a manpower issue. Just the way that this is proposed. All the other developments we have in town, whether it's the Woodlands are right across the street. And we don't have full access around every building in the Woodlands, but we do have full access at least on 2 sides of them. The building's a little different because there's common stairways that go in, and we're able to get to those. They do have standpipes. It's a little bit different.
We
These
have
are
common
probably
stairways.
closer- These are probably closer to like the Lincoln Village condos up the street here. And again, we pulled up to every single one of those. We have full access right to the front door of every one of those units. Thayer Street, the same thing. We have full access pulling right up to it. Townsend Street, Temple Street, the old 33, Randolph Street, we have full access to that. These are very unique, but we don't have that here.
these aren't 3-story individual units, there's 3 floors of units, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, that's a 3-story building.
Right, but that's 3, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
you different units on top of each other.
And your front door for each one, and these are all your doors going into a.
They're not 3-story
I
units.
thought they were townhouses.
You have common stairs.
So they're 3, each building is 3 stories, each unit.
That's
Yeah.
correct. So you come in the front door and then you walk up the stairs and you'll
Right.
have you'll have a unit there.
But each unit is 1 floor, it's not,
No, it's all
That's
3.
correct.
No, you're saying it's all 3,
Is
all,
it a unit per floor? Yeah, flats. They are.
they're flats.
So where is the?
So they've got 3 floors in it.
Like, are there common hallways?
Yes, you'll walk in and you'll have a unit on your right, you'll have a unit on your left. You go up the stairs, you have a unit on your right. you have a unit on your
Same as the
left.
Woodlands, almost.
Where is the access to?
Chief, the board behind you shows it.
We haven't seen any of these.
when I consider a townhouse, it's 1 unit, 3 stories tall, individual, separated by firewalls. The townhouses aren't floor by floor. I don't quite get how you're calling them townhouses. And the ones in Woodlands, they're units side by side, and they're 3 stories tall, each one, plus a basement. I'm
Yeah,
not,
these are different.
So these are so these are apartments?
These are apartments.
I thought they were townhouses.
This is even worse, after seeing this, just, so now, if this is, these are common stairs going into individual apartments, so there's 6 per floor. So again, this is the walkway, we're parked down here somewhere. So now we have to bring the fire hose down here, up here, and up 3 floors to get in here. That's even worse, we hadn't seen that, I thought that was stuff. We need access to get in there, we gotta be able to drive to the front doors.
Ma'am, in the front with the green, you've been patiently.
But not as important as
Sorry.
fire.
Name and address, please, I'm sorry.
92 Progress Street, Bethany View. So I live on the back side, not Progress Street, something better. And these are like yes, no, like clarity questions. We were told expect to see directly in our backyard. And I just, the tree screen that I heard you guys talking about, it sounded more like a conversation. Is there definitely gonna be a tree screen on our side, on your side?
It would be on the project side.
Okay. And could we request to have one on our side as well, so we're not looking at a fence?
Oh, well,
Right now, we look
that, I
at,
mean, that could be, that, we could certainly have the fence and then the landscaping behind it, so you're looking at trees, not a fence.
yeah, just, right now, we enjoy the privacy of just the trees.
Or like leave some trees.
Well, there's about 20 feet.
There's
kind of
some
minimum.
nice trees there I like to look at.
The problem is, as you know, that their branches don't start really till
Right.
10, 15 feet up at this point.
The
'cause of-
illusion.
Yeah.
Of trees. And then, so that's definitely gonna happen, trees,
Yes, we
landscaping.
We
Okay.
will,
It's
we're
not
gonna
a
consider,
conversation.
we're gonna probably try to put it as a condition that there'll
would be
be,
a condition, you know, we talked, as we've been talking tonight, I'm writing down, this is taking your notes, but I'm writing down everything too, so.
And then, in addition to the trees, the actual fence, so somebody said they walked the property recently. We live in real townhouses, and, the backyard deck is elevated, so if it's a 6-foot fence, it's gonna be like looking at people. So can you get that fence higher, or am I making it up that it's not up to 6 feet?
No, it would be on the back of the site. We're proposing in that location, we're filling up to 3 or 4 feet. So grade will be at least 3 or 4 feet higher than it is now with the fence on top of it. So from your side of the property line, it will probably be top of fence, probably 9 feet or so.
And I agree with some of the conversation that people are probably going to be attracted to this because they can take the train into the city. But living in the city, now living in Abington, there's no way you live here and not have a car. So I do feel like that extra parking area towards Summer Street is going to be a requirement for people to live there. And so I am nervous about all these additional people kind of in my back area. So with that, talking about how to safely have a fire truck over there, have all this parking that's going to be required, just all these kind of necessities. And then as we talk about the lighting, obviously there has to be lighting. What kind of glow do you think, as a residents right there, we can expect to have in our backyards?
Yeah, the regulations don't allow light spillage over the property line. So the way it's designed doesn't allow any.
Anything that we would approve, we always have conditions, on the light design and stuff like that. My fellow planning board member here is an architect, and I know that Jeff always asks this, but there are ways to avoid the light spillage, and this is always a condition when we approve something.
And then more on fences, is there gonna, and this is, I think, the question for the planning board, since there's gonna be so much going on as we're abutters, is there gonna be a giant construction fence to keep out debris and that, or is that who would be responsible for that? I'm just curious if that's something that we would see.
Generally, I'll address this to proponents, but generally they'll have street cleaners, street sweepers, if there's dirt and stuff like that on the road. Sometimes a construction fence, they'll put like plastic to avoid, like plastic in between the slats of the temporary fence to these are the construction sites that I've seen. Because that's always an issue with dirt and dust and debris. All the construction sites, and I've been on the planning board a long time, everything that I've ever seen
Yeah.
is something like that.
I'm just really nervous about the air
Oh, yeah.
quality. I've got 3 kids under 3. And
They-
we're gonna be in the backyard.
I live right down the street from 121 Randolph Street, you know, the building 77 units, and that's been going on in my backyard for the last couple of years, so, yeah, they had to have that too, because that stuff would come into our yard.
So that's something we can definitely plan on seeing
So-
if this happens.
So one of the conditions we have to discuss is something called a stormwater prevention plan. And basically, it's so that when they start tearing down trees and moving dirt around, that whatever the kick-up doesn't all of a sudden run off if we have a big rainstorm.
Yeah.
Or run into the wetlands, or run into sewer systems, or whatever. And part of that contains, you'll see hay bales with, like, plastic wrapping around it to make sure that, you know, there isn't silt running off. Part of it is dust control.
Sausages, it looks like a big
Yeah.
round thing. It's
Stuff with hay and-
Yeah.
So there are things that we'll require as part of any development for the most part to make sure. And if you do see these problems happening, you can always let us know and we can reach out to the developer directly and whatnot.
Because there'll be a site representative. Gentlemen, sir, please. You. Yeah, you.
Ron Rogers, 438 Summer Street. I have a question about the parking for the commercial space and the residential space. Is that the same number? If I own a commercial business, you know, would I have parking in that location, or is it all combined?
So the total parking requirement that we meet is divided, so the required 100 and, find it here. So the required 171 spaces, there's 150 required for residential and 21 required for the 6,000 square feet of commercial space. So the total parking provided exceeds the, you know, what's required for zoning for both. So we don't have a specific number designated that says commercial parking only.
Which building is commercial?
It would be in this building.
And so if I was at the T station, how would I get to that store?
So there's a walkway here, and then the sidewalk that comes from
Parking
there.
lot's not connected to the T.
No.
And what kind of business do you think would rent that space?
I don't know if you want to speak to that. I know we mentioned stuff like a coffee shop or convenience, something small that's kind of suited for both the residents that live here and then commuters if they want to park the car and go get a coffee.
So if I went to the coffee shop, I'd be fighting for a parking space with the residents of the place also?
Well, if you're coming to the commuter rail and you don't live here and you park in the commuter rail's lot,
I understand that.
you can walk
If
over.
I had a business there, why, I mean, I don't feel like I do well if I wouldn't have any parking. I just think the commercial's gonna fail, and that's the plan, it's gonna fail, and you're gonna put apartments in there instead. I just don't understand, I can't imagine a commercial space working there.
Well, so it'll be a condition of approval that there be this is something I've been fighting for, because again, the spirit of, I'm a planner by trade, and the spirit of transit-oriented development includes a commercial element. Now, I know this isn't Boston or Quincy or even Braintree, but it's Abington, but this is something when this town passed this district many years ago. This is something that we wanted to encourage because of the proximity of the train station. I've done the counts in the train station. The occupancy of the train station is very successful. That is probably an attractive thing to these folks why they came here, and because of the success of the train station and the access. But that would be a condition of approval that there be commercial space there. And it would be in their best interest to work that out so that they can do that. Okay, gentleman in the back, please.
Yes, hi, I'm John Keenan, State Senator, I represent Abington and many of the other communities that have been referenced tonight, Quincy, Braintree, Rockland, and Holbrook. And I don't want to get involved in the specifics of the project, because I appreciate the work that you have to do. I served on the zoning board for about 7.5, almost 8 years. I've sat through many of these types of meetings, and so I know you have a lot of work in front of you. And I have to say, based on my experience with the zoning board, the questions and the issues that have been raised tonight by the residents are really on point. That having been said, I wanted to come here this evening because of the issue that has been raised a few times, and that is transit-oriented development. And one of the things that we're looking at in the legislature is how do we meet to satisfy the enormous housing demand that we face, not only in the Boston area, but in the whole ring around Boston, and that includes Abington and communities south and west and east of here. There is an enormous need for housing. The Chamber of Commerce has done some studies about where the South Shore, where this area is headed in terms of employment opportunities and in terms of housing to match those employment opportunities and those employment needs. We are in desperate need of housing throughout the entire region. The legislature and the governor are looking more intently at transit-oriented development. And one of the things that jumps out at us as legislators as we look at our transportation network is that there are commuter rails that go, commuter rail lines that go throughout the Commonwealth. Many communities pushed the state to have those stations with the idea that they wanted to provide that convenience to their residents. And there was an implicit, and in some cases an explicit, agreement that those areas would ultimately be designated for development because they are on rail lines and it makes sense to build more density around commuter rail stations. And so there are proposals along many of these rails. If you've gone to Weymouth Landing lately, you've seen that that is now being developed. That's in a commuter rail station in Quincy. The North Quincy parking lot is being developed. The area at the Quincy Adams station has been developed across the street. And also the MBTA has declared available for development the surface lot at Quincy Adams, although that project is a few years down the road. The planners are looking at the area around the Braintree train station. And so it's the logical place for development. And from a policy standpoint, it's something that the legislature and the governor's office are looking at. And so there's a lot of work and discussion still, it appears, to be done relative to this project in terms of public safety access and density and all that. And again, I'll leave that to you, but I come here this evening to make a pitch for transit-oriented development. We desperately need housing in the Commonwealth. We desperately need housing in this area of the Commonwealth. And transit-oriented development is one of the areas that we're looking at. And I know that there are issues that come up every time any development is proposed. And we're going through this in all the communities that I represent. It's how do you find the balance between preserving the character of a community and the safety of the residents in the community, the provision of services within the community with that enormous demand for housing. And I hear all the time this kind of situation where people will say, my children can't live in the community that they grew up in. And that's starting to look to be the case for my children, 26, 24, 19 years old. And at the same time, we don't want to build any more housing. And so that almost guarantees that our children won't be able to live in the community in which we live. And so we've got to look at how to do it. And one other quick point, it's going to be, there are going to be young people that certainly move in to these residences because it is appealing, because it is on the commuter rail. But the most recent study that was done highlighted the number of homes, 2- and 3-bedroom homes, scattered throughout all Massachusetts, and eastern Massachusetts particularly, where there's 1 or 2 people living. And so they're underutilized. Families can't move into neighborhoods because there's maybe a single or 2 people living in a 3-bedroom house. And the answer to that, the planners will tell you, is to have housing like this, so that people who are in these bigger homes and want to downsize and have the convenience of transportation have the ability to do it, and then it opens up a home in a neighborhood. And that then becomes more predictable for the school system in terms of trying to plan how many young people will be in the community that need education. So it's a complex problem, but the answer is transit-oriented development. One of the answers to transit-oriented development, it's a policy the state is advancing, and I think this fits the idea, and if not specifically at this point, it's my hope that it will. One other point, the project was brought to my attention, one, because I try to keep up with what's going on in town, and ordinarily, I wouldn't touch a local hearing before a planning board or a zoning board or a conservation commission with a 10-foot pole as a state elected official. But I ran Mr. Iredale, and we sat down and we talked about this, and he outlined what the project was, and I said, well, that's, again, not getting into details conceptually, that's what we need in the Commonwealth. And so I hope that this conversation continues. I hope that you address the issues that have been raised. I think they're great issues, and they have to be addressed. And I know past dealings with Mr. Iredale did a project that I'm familiar with in Quincy. He's a type of developer that will listen and will work and will do what he says. And so it's my hope that when this is all done, there's a project here that's acceptable to the community, that meets all the requirements, and is one that contributes to the community. So I just wanted to come and make that point. You're probably saying, get out of here, it's not your issue, but because it's transit-oriented development, I thought that I would come down and express our desire for transit-oriented development, not only in Abington, but in communities throughout my district.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one quick?
I do not, no.
Where do you live?
I live in Quincy.
You live in the city?
Yes.
Big difference.
Oh, enormous difference, and I don't discount that. I don't discount that at all. It's an enormous difference. And a project like this in Quincy, actually, wouldn't be considered a huge project, but all the same...
But there's more access.
But my point is, all the same issues that you're raising would be raised in Quincy as well. Because there's so much development going on there. There's more development going on there than here, but it's the same issues that are raised.
But there's more access.
There's more access, and you made a very good point. It's not the quantity of units, it's how you get in and out. But my point is, I hope that the conversation continues and that something good comes of this, that's a win-win. And I do appreciate and understand Quincy's different from Braintree, which I represent, which is different from Holbrook, which is different from Rockland, which is different from Abington. And there's character to each community. And again, that balance is preserving that character and yet still providing housing and meeting the housing demand that's so serious around here.
Thank you.
So I leave it up to the wisdom of the board and you know.
I think this is a public hearing, I appreciate your comment. I want to let the lady
Thank you.
in the black, right, yes, you, please.
I totally agree with you.
Name and address, please, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, my name's Joanne Harding, I'm 183 Summer Street. So I'm between the block of Walnut Street and that long stretch of wetlands on both sides before you get to Progress Street. And I agree with you that Quincy and Weymouth and all those towns, they don't have the wildlife, they don't have the greenery. I am sick of picking up dead animals off Summer Street. You know, honestly, it's not funny. If deer strikes on Summer Street are one of the highest in the town, there are turkeys going back and forth between the wetlands all the time. There are like baby turkeys, cars just flying through them. So many times I stand in my kitchen at night and I watch the stop sign, watching accidents after accidents because people don't stop on Walnut Street to summer. I spend 5 minutes every morning trying to get out of my driveway to go to work. I have the train, I'm close to the train station. My husband and I do not go into Boston to work. We work locally. So just because there's accommodation there doesn't mean that these people are going to utilise it and work in Boston. I just want people to understand that wildlife is a big part of this area and one of the biggest reasons why I moved to this town. I had a choice of going anywhere, but I fell in love with Abington. I love to see the deer in my yard. I love to see the turkeys. I've seen turtles. You know, I think that they should be considered as well, and I think there should be an impact study. And I've asked for this before, and I think I just got hushed off, like I feel like that's what's happening right now. But I'm an advocate for animals, so I'm sorry, but I'd really like to see something done about it. Even if it was like entering Summer Street and exiting, is it Centre Street on the other side? So it's one way or something like that, so you don't have all that traffic coming down Summer. It's not a state road. It's a residential road.
Hi, Donna Peavy, Summer Street. I grew up in Quincy, and so all due respect to you, I know when you were Congressman, you like Saturday boarding meetings too, but we also have Route 18 being constructed, so they're all cutting through our Summer Street too, but through Summer Street too. And Weymouth Landing is more of commercial, where we're just houses. We're just little families with little kids, more than North Quincy, where you've got all the businesses at the T station. And Quincy Adams, you've got Home Depot and Lowe's, and you've got all the businesses. This is a neighborhood that's just being taken over by cars. My husband does utilize the T. We did move here for the commuter rail, and we did buy a house for the commuter rail because he goes to Boston. He gets on the commuter rail, and I talk to him, he can't move. And he's in Abington, he takes the Kingston one. He's two stops, and the commuter rail is packed. So more people are gonna move in, and they're gonna get on it, and they're not gonna be able to move. And then they're gonna come, and you're gonna have these three bedroom, 2 bedrooms. They're gonna have kids. They're gonna need another car for soccer, for whatnot, and then the schools are gonna budge out too, where our school committees can't handle the budget, so the room for it. You just built a new high school that's already, the 6th grade is already bulging out of it. It's just not, it's too big. And then I came late because I couldn't get out of my driveway because the meeting was at 6 o'clock. 6,000 feet of retail space, is that just gonna stay empty until you decide? Like someone comes in, or how long is that gonna be?
I think what we're
Like,
trying
is
to,
anybody in there yet? Are you figuring that,
no,
or?
I think what we're trying to offer is suggestions of what that space could be leased, but obviously, the project's not approved by this board or conservation, and certainly not constructed, so it's hard to say exactly who that tenant would be.
Because no against you, Bruce, but we've got Mary Lou's, Dunkin' Donuts, Dairy Queen, and Honeydew in one corner, and a convenience store all right there too. And they all have drive-throughs. Have you ever seen that corner? Dairy Queen is like down the street, in the middle of the street.
So there would be no drive-through.
So it's just
obviously.
crazy, as it is crazy traffic, because I'm just still trying to figure, I'm all about traffic. I have an 8-year-old that likes to play in our yard, we like to be outside, and that's my biggest concern.
I'm going to do a couple more residential comments. I'll let Ron has this, Mr. Howe has this.
Ron Howe, 149 Walnut Street. First question is basically, how long can the commercial units sit vacant before they can come back before the board and claim hardship? And have to ask, switch over to residential. Can that happen?
Yeah, Sean Carpenter on behalf of the developer. So a couple of things about the commercial space that we prepare for, that we plan for on these mixed-use developments that are oftentimes required. You can look at Union Point and some of the other. Very often in the underwriting, you actually assume no revenue for that space, and when that revenue, when somebody rents it up, it's a boom. You can't get financing on that space because many of these developments, the space does remain vacant for a while. However, here, it's not a ton of space. So, I mean, it's 6,000 square feet. So your potential tenants are dry cleaners, coffee shops, co-working space, things like that are potentials in there. And maybe some small offices, insurance companies, that type, and I don't want to say that an insurance company, but, that type of retail, small retail that would come in here. But again, it's not like if it stays vacant for 100 days that we can convert it to an additional unit. We're asking for 150 units to be permitted here. That's what we're going to do. There's always this concern in these meetings that, well, after so long, we're just going to convert it to residential space. More than likely, if it doesn't convert, then it will become amenity space for the folks living in those buildings.
The co-working, why don't you speak to the explain what co-working is, please.
So, about a year ago, co-working space was the hottest thing going in Boston, and now it's, it's like the worst thing possible for a financing situation. But, co-working is for a lot of the young entrepreneurs that are utilizing, they're basically hoteling desks, and they go in and they work. Because one of the things, and Senator Keenan kind of points out a lot of the work being done by the legislature and the governor's office, one of the big things coming from the governor's office is that they want more people to work from home and utilize these types of co-working spaces in their own neighborhoods, because there's just too many people on transit, on 93, on Route 18, on Route 3.
We don't need this near the commuter rail then.
So, well, not everything is, you know,
Trying to lighten it up a little.
not everything is black and white, but there's a lot of policies around this stuff, and that's why this bylaw was passed. And I think in the co-working environment, what it will do is actually maybe folks, and this is what's happened in a couple of developments around here, is that, folks will live in the building and then have a small, rentable office that they can, instead of renting it by the month, you rent it by the hour. It's kind of like hotels like that, but we don't want to welcome those into town,
They don't happen.
I'm not in the hotel business.
Okay, a couple more residential comments. Chief, I'm going to get to you in a second. I'll let you go again.
Actually, my question is for the fire chief.
Okay.
Last fall, you made a comment that with all the new infrastructure going up in town, the current staffing that you have, the current equipment that you have, a project of this size became a life safety risk in the town. Has that changed?
No, my FY '21 budget request has at least one additional fire inspector trainer personnel to deal specifically with not this project, but all of these projects that we're seeing a lot of these, and then the maintaining of the current buildings in town as well as all of these new ones where we can't keep up with it. So there's a direct cost because of all of these, not just this one project, although this is one of many that it's definitely caused that.
So we're still in the same situation?
Correct.
So the more properties that are going up, without adequate funding for you and your team, then we are all at risk because you could be at one of these sites or even at one of our houses and not have enough resources to deal with the follow-up situation in town.
That would go as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Who pays for this? There's a gentleman in the far corner. Please.
Yeah, Richard O'Hara, Jean Carroll Road. So actually, along that exact line and some of the other things, do we have any sort of numbers at this point as to what this project might generate in terms of revenues for the town? Because some of the things that we're talking about increased budget for the fire chief, increased traffic enforcement because we're worried about the traffic that goes along there, extra sidewalks so people aren't walking along the street. Those all take money for the town to be able to do. And my suspicion is that the property that's going to go through here and the taxes that will be created are going to be a significant source of revenue for the town. So I think that's one of the things we keep in mind while we're keeping in mind the other impact things. There is some positive impact to this.
Not if you're walking down Summer Street, it isn't.
There's no sidewalk, there's no lights.
Maybe we need to build sidewalks.
Have
Maybe the
you
town.
been to a finance council meeting in this town?
I have not.
Okay, start there.
But that's why I'm asking the question of, do we have an idea as to what kind of revenue might be generated by the project?
The money gets earmarked for something long before it gets to that point.
All right, well, okay, thank you very much for your comment. One response, and then go over your,
So that's a great point. It's about $280,000 in tax. Right now, the tax on this property is less than $10,000. I don't know what it is. It's a couple of $1,000 because it's vacant space. But 150 units will generate, upwards of about $280,000 in direct and indirect taxes with the retail space.
and you have an estimate of, again, I'm not acting as a proponent, but excise taxes, car registrations, people got to register their cars.
Well, that's an exponential that I can't give you, but I'm just talking about real estate taxes and potential retail sales.
All right, okay, let's see, go to you and I'll go to you.
Just since we have you here, and you're talking about the legislation and the state of Massachusetts, I work in Boston, so I understand the unique problems that are facing the Commonwealth. Is that an opportunity to get state funding for a small community that wants to be more like a city? Because I think that's what we're faced with, $280,000 a year in revenue. This doesn't cover costs. We're a very large firm, financial firm in Boston. So that doesn't go very far anymore. So I'm just curious if we want to build out the town of Abington in this way, do we have support outside of the town revenue to build up the town and meet its needs for safety concerns?
I'm not an expert on Chapter 40 operations, but there's a chapter on the state law that does provide kind of, for lack of a better word, mitigation payments to a community that does would development with commercial aspects near transit oriented within transit hubs. It's called 40R, and there are payments that come back. I don't think this is a 40R project, but there are programs like that under state law with this incentive. And is also looking, people starting to look at different ways of doing it. And one of the things is in some communities where development doesn't make sense because there is no public transportation, there is no extensive road network, and you know that everybody who lives in one of those places can have 2 cars, every person without exception. And they clog the roads, and then they travel into blocking the roads. So there's some thinking out there starting to take hold that maybe those communities shouldn't be forced to do housing, but they should be forced to contribute to mitigate the costs associated with housing in communities where it makes more sense. And so there's talk like that going on, but there's a lot of discussion. And it's kind of a little bit of a candid discussion because it's such an enormous need for housing.
So I need to jump in right here. And I love that you asked that question because I think you raise a very good point, which is, full disclosure, I used to work for Senator Keenan. He knows I'm a loudmouth. So he's raised the issue about housing, which is very important. Mr. Foreman's here from the South Shore Chamber, and the South Shore Chamber set a goal of 44,000 housing units in the region over the next, by 2030, over a 20-year period.
And we have a housing production plan.
Here's the problem with between the South Shore's plan, what the governor's looking to do up at the State House, is that there's very little in it for communities in terms of how to absorb that growth, and this is what we're seeing here. And what I'd like to make the pitch for, 40 years ago, towns used to be able to build their sewer and water treatment infrastructure and get 90% of the cost covered through federal and state grants. That's all gone now. So towns have to pick up the cost of it. Well, we can get a low-interest loan, but the burden of funding the infrastructure to house these housing units is now all borne by the people in this room, which is a big change from what it was when we were doing veteran housing 60, 70 years ago, when we were doing subdivisions 40 years ago. So if we're going to be asked to absorb all these new housing units over the next coming years, we need grant money to help do infrastructure, and that includes traffic lights, traffic intersections, sidewalks, all this stuff that we're seeing impacted, so that when traffic is tripled off Summer Street over the past 15 years, because it's now a cut-through, because Rockland, East Bridgewater, Whitman, Abington are all grown out, the town of Abington doesn't have the money available to do those sort of projects. This is where the state can really help us, so that when we have a development like this, we can't tap I-cubed money because this isn't an economic development project. There's very limited state grant opportunities for strictly housing developments or to mitigate impacts from housing units. This is where we could really use your help advocating for towns like Abington, so that we can say, all right, this project's coming in, we can tap this grant source, and now we can address the problem of traffic on Summer Street, and we can do a traffic study to see if we can do one-way off 18, or build additional sidewalks so that it's more walkable, et cetera. I'll get off my soapbox.
All right, I'm going to step in here now. We've had great responses here. Our town council would like to make some comments, please.
Sure. My comments are simply on the project, on the plans, some of the things that are missing that are required under the zoning bylaw. Under the zoning bylaw, they're only allowed to have a retail space of 2,000 square feet. And I'm not sure if that 6,000 has been separated out on a plan to show you exactly where each 2,000 square foot retail store will be. I didn't see that. I didn't see any ground-mounted lighting, which is required. The overall purpose of the zoning bylaw, section 175.2, is safety. So I think that your fire chief's comments weigh very, very heavy in any kind of decision here, because if he says that he can't get to a unit and he can't get somewhere in a comfortable amount of time for him, then that goes to the general purpose of the zoning bylaw, which is safety. So I would encourage you to take a look at his concerns, and I would encourage the applicant to take a look at those concerns. And then the other thing is that, with regard to the setbacks, I still do not think they meet the setbacks, even if they combine the lots. I don't necessarily, that's not necessarily a planning board issue, but if they go in for a building permit, there's a chance that they're not gonna get a building permit without a variance because of the setback issues.
Quick additional question for you, and I don't know if there's a quick answer to this. There are very limited reasons why planning boards can reject site plan reviews, I feel like, increasingly few. Under what conditions could traffic be a reason hypothetically?
So this is a special permit. You're also granting a special permit. So they need all four of you to vote in the affirmative to receive those. I think there's more than one special permit. I think there's two special permits.
Because we're
So
voting on two things, the site plan and the special permit.
there's a couple things that they're seeking relief for
Mhm.
that are special permit requirements.
Mhm.
But, so yes, so in that special permit, if, for example, the fact that they're increasing the residential use of the property, that's a special permit that you guys are considering. That increasing of the residential use, if that goes to traffic, then that's something that you can consider. And then, again, the standard for a special permit is not more detrimental to the neighborhood.
All right, we've reached the 2-hour mark on this discussion, so this has been great input from everyone. I guess at this point, I'm looking for a motion to close the public hearing. One more, all right, one more, Chief.
Could I just, especially in light of town council's concerns on that, could I just say one more thing?
Sure.
Because it's important that I think everybody in the room hears this. The fire department had not seen this prior to tonight. We have not seen this. To be honest,
Those are part of the submittal.
I don't believe we got them, for whatever reason. We haven't seen the floor plan yet on this. And this is somewhat of a game changer, at least in the layout of your project. Because basically, each one of these, if you can see these doorways, is a 6-family unit. Each one of these is a 6-family building. There's 30 families right here, there's 24 families right here, and so on. I was under the assumption this was gonna be more like as a townhouse, not as that. So even if we're along the back here, we still can't access anything in these buildings. All access to any of these has to be from here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's a game changer. Basically, so that because of that, if you can envision, each one of these is like a brownstone on Mass Ave, and they're facing inward. It's simply not doable. We need to have apparatus be able to pull up to the front of these entryways, whether this is the ground floor or whatever, because this is our access into all of these, to get up into the first floor units, the second floor, and the third floor units, whether it's for fire or simple medical emergency or anything. We need to be able to pull up to the front of these buildings. If you can envision, this was Mass Ave with these brownstones, but they're facing inward. We're not Boston Fire, nor do we have their personnel, but even then, they don't face out. We have to be able to somehow have access to these with the apparatus. You have to have a paved road or flip them or something. We have to be able to pull up each one of these entryways in order to safely accommodate any need that's there. So, thank you.
But Chief, if we separated the buildings, gave you the access to the middle, would you still require the driveway behind access behind?
As long as, if we can drive in the front up there, it's not as critical. Again, the woodlands, there's different areas where we don't have full access, there's, we don't have full access to that. But for the front of these, and I know it changes the whole look, but in reality, we have to be able to service these residents that are over here, because we can't safely do that now. I was under the impression, again, for whatever reason, we had not got this. We had not seen this floor plan. That changes everything. That changes our complete access to anything here. So even my prior scenario, that if we have a heart attack victim or one of these, I thought these were individual townhouse units. They are not. So even if we pull up here for a heart attack, that does us no good. This is the back of the building. We have to be able to get to the front.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Board, what's your pleasure right now? Have we heard enough? Would we want to move to close the public hearing? If we close the public hearing, that's it for the discussion. Do we think that I'm just reaching out to the board, you think we need to have any more discussion?
I think we've had a number of issues raised tonight that we need to get some more information on.
Okay.
I agree. No matter how I look at this, I'm not going to get past the fire chief's issues until that's there. There's really no, until that's satisfied, there's really no way to even consider anything else. Then the next thing is going to be the street. But, okay.
All right, well,
Just a comment, it just seems to be going on and on and on, and we get nowhere. I know there's other issues that were raised tonight that, I guess I don't know where we're going with this. We can continue it and continue.
yeah, it's the pleasure of the board. We've been doing this since June, and the thing that disappoints me, I'll just make an observation, is why didn't you do a traffic study for this thing?
With respect to that, we submitted the Old Colony materials. We had a traffic engineer on board, and the board indicated that Mr. Dirks was going to do a traffic study, which, I mean, he projected traffic based on the ITE manual, based on the counts that Old Colony had. If we did a traffic study, it would have been exactly the same study. And he has a study back from, an analysis back from, I think it was November. He has a follow-up in January. It reads very much like an applicant's traffic study in terms of the number of, there are counts there are levels of service. You have a traffic study, but your peer review consultant did it.
Well, the board isn't in a position to do a traffic study for you. We would be in a position to review a traffic study. We have Mr. Dirk as our consulting engineer. It's not the board's responsibility to do I'm not trying to be flip.
No,
But it's not our responsibility to do if it was me, and I've been a planner for 35 years, I would have done a traffic study for this thing, but.
If you would like us to do a traffic study, we could do a traffic study. The information is all there.
Because the issues that are being raised tonight, I've heard this, we've all heard this, it's safety. And a traffic study would address these issues. Now, I'm with Bob, we've considered this over and over again a long time. We've had an awful lot of discussion, but it's the board's pleasure. Do we vote to close the public hearing, which cuts off the information, and then we vote to either continue this or approve this with conditions including a traffic study, including the truck turning radius of the fire truck, I'm writing down the tree plantings, a lot of these, things that we've discussed here tonight. So what's the pleasure of the board?
I think we leave it open.
So do you want to continue this?
Does the applicant have to request a continuance, or can we?
We'll consent. We request, and we'll consent.
I guess
Can you provide that in writing?
Sure.
Okay, great.
I guess my point is, again, it just seems to be going on and on. I wish we could have a really good plan and be able to do something with it.
Yeah,
And maybe mitigate some of these problems that aren't just news today.
There's a truism in planning that you can't, again, I'm not trying to be flip, but I've been planning for a long time. You can't expect the local planning boards to do we've been coming, and we've made suggestions.
And we've responded, let me not be flip.
No, I understand.
We have responded to every comment that your peer reviewer has given us. That's the custom. We come in with an application, you hire a peer reviewer, and you go through the checklist. And that's what we've done. And so, asking for a traffic study after 7 months is a little unusual too. We're here, we'll do it, we understand, we recognize the concerns that are raised, but I resent the inference that we have not been responsive, because we've been very responsive.
All right, board.
I don't think they could pull this off in a couple of weeks to return this. So that's some pretty serious work around the buildings. I don't know. There's got to be a break-off point, but I would accept like a 2-month.
It's up to you.
It's only if they're going to change it.
I mean, again, I'll lay this out again. Do we want to close this, or do we want to continue this?
I'll move to continue, to keep it open, and I'll just voice what I expect to see addressed next time we come in here. And I think we're all kind of feeling like if we're not seeing it ready by next time, then we might have to call it. We need to see the landscaping between the abutters on Progress Street, how that's going to play out. We need to see any changes to the possible second parking lot in the corner, including setbacks from the road, fire truck turning radius. For our engineer, did we at one point discuss pedestrian measures, safety measures, particularly along Monahan and crossing Summer Street?
They've provided crosswalks.
They have crosswalks. What about the flashing lights as pedestrians are crossing?
We asked, so we have a series of comments that were never responded to. So just to be clear, the applicant should look at the comments we provided, which speak to exactly what you're talking about, and they should provide responses. There has never been a written response to any of the comments related, that I prepared. There's never been.
Right, so there's definitely some issues in this one that we'd like to see included.
The January 28th, I thought that was the last.
What you'll see in the comment letters is there's 3 comment letters. The first one was overall, it included some traffic information that we provided and comments on the site plan and layout.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the next letter, nothing's been addressed. We just updated our traffic numbers to address the site plan, to changes in the site plan. And then if you look at the comments in the site plan, they're exactly the same as what was in the original comment letter.
So is the reason that they haven't been addressed that they can't be addressed?
I don't think so. I mean, you can ask the applicant, because I think a lot of them are things they absolutely can be addressed, all of them. And none of them are things that would cause the project to be unable to be constructed, let me put it that way. They just need to do it, and it's sort of like the things we were talking about, which is, how do you get to the dumpster? Show us how that works. So they're easy things, it's just, no one seemed to have looked at them.
To move this along, Rick, please continue.
To adjust the landscaping in between the buildings to allow fire apparatus in between, to give them front access to all buildings, and then how that impacts that rear lot, I think you just had a conversation on. Town council's brought up the issue of ground-mounted lighting. She's also brought up the issue of whether or not the setbacks meet, and I'd like to just go back and make sure that you believe that the setbacks are appropriate. I would actually like to see the stormwater protection plan at least sketched out a bit, so we know what issues we're looking at, instead of having that as a post-approval document. And personally, this is something that I had written down before it got mentioned, but I think it's worth the board to at least consider, is as part of mitigation for the impact on traffic that this will have, is to have them do a traffic study, but also then to study what possible changes could be put into effect to help mitigate the impact, whether that's changes in traffic light on Plymouth, whether it's one-way, preventing turns off 18 down Summer Street.
Or putting the traffic light at the corner of Summer and Bedford Street.
Correct. And I would like to see that as a mitigation measure, considering this will have a impact on traffic on Summer Street.
So you've made the motion.
And they'll have to designate the 3 retail areas too.
And
To make sure they're not more than 2,000 square feet.
So Rick,
Can I ask a question on that, just so I understand? We're just simply showing 3 2,000 square foot rectangles, not 1 6,000 square foot rectangle. on the floor
Correct.
plan.
So you have to take that L and separate it out.
Yes.
So you have, it has to show commercial on the ground floor, and each retail space cannot be over 2,000.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
so Rick, just to move this on, sorry. Rick has made a motion to continue. Mr. Shea, would you read what Mr. Collins has just said? Mr. Collins, Mrs. Shea, we're being very formal.
Okay, so there's a list
He's made a motion to continue the hearing, and he would like to see the landscaping between Progress and the project sketched out, changes to the possible second parking lot setbacks and fire truck turning radiuses, the adjustment to the landscape at the rear lot. And then town council has ground mounted lighting setbacks she doesn't believe they're being met. He's asked them to confirm they are being met. Stormwater protection plan, sketched out mitigation on traffic. He would like a traffic study and see what changes can be implemented, calling it a mitigation measure. And then town council included that they need to designate 3 retail areas, the 2,000 square foot 3 retail areas separately.
And whatever, and the pedestrian safety recommendations in Mr. Dirk's letter from January 3rd.
And we would be looking for a continuance of 2 months, 1 month?
I assume they'd want 2 months, but
2 months.
Mr. Carpenter has a question.
I just have so in July, we submitted raw data from a traffic report that was part of our continued application back over the summer. That was in draft format because nobody had requested that we do a traffic study. We provided those. Those weren't Old Colony numbers. Jack Gillen, our traffic engineer, is here. So we provided that. Are you asking, as part of that condition, to finalize that report and put the mitigation measures in, or are you asking us to supply those numbers? And clearly, our reviewer didn't see that.
I saw the numbers, so let's be clear. I saw the numbers, and I think we just need to understand, when you're talking about a traffic study, are you talking about someone doing physical traffic counts on a roadway and providing that data, and that's the traffic study?
We provided that.
So I have that.
Okay.
But what is the impact of this project in terms of what it does to motorist delays and vehicle queuing on the roadways, existing versus proposed? And that's the traffic study is not just traffic counts.
It's an analysis.
It's an analysis of that data and what your impact is. That wasn't provided. We did provide some context using that information, and that's what I spoke about tonight.
I just wanted to be clear that, so we have all that data, we need to wrap it up
You
in the
need to
mitigation.
put it in a
that
form
you've
that
asked.
conforms with a traffic study, what a traffic study is.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Any other conditions?
Well, regarding the lighting, about looking at additional lighting and shorten the poles. And the only thing we didn't mention was what the lighting on, are we doing lighting on Monahan Way? Or are we leaving it? It's existing? Okay.
And we have continue 2 months or
Do we need to have a separate meeting again for this?
I think we should have a separate meeting for this. Because this is such a big issue.
Yeah.
That I think we need to have a separate meeting. We've been at this almost 2.5 hours, and this is just one thing, so I think we need to have a separate meeting. So 2 months?
Are we meeting on the 13th of April?
Yes, is that the week after the 6th?
Yeah.
Yeah, Wayne couldn't make that.
What about April 7th?
Do you want to do the first Monday? Because I don't think Wayne could meet.
No?
I think that's why because you guys can all meet that first Monday in April, right?
Yep.
I think he was one who couldn't make the meeting.
We could go the first Monday in April.
So you can do them.
Let's do,
The only problem is I'm not sure if they're going to have time to make all these changes, get it to team for review.
So what about May?
May's okay.
May. A special meeting in May, a Tuesday,
You do
maybe.
it on a Monday. Oh, wait a minute, no.
No, 'cause the
I need
first one-
Tuesday to have the room.
Right. So this is the first Tuesday in May?
It's May 5th?
May what?
May 5th.
People
So-
screwing up my birthday, just saying.
Right. My work scheduled a meeting on my birthday, and I'm like, what?
So Tuesday, May 6th, right?
Fifth. May 5th. So, Rick, Ms. Collins has made the motion to continue this, and it's going to go to May 5th. I need a
When's our
6
meeting
o'clock?
in May, on the 4th?
5th.
No.
The regularly
meeting.
planned one.
Yeah, we still have a meeting on the 4th.
But this is just going to be a special
Get special back-to-back meetings.
Is the public allowed to push back on the data source of traffic being July?
If you have your own data.
Well, I want to go through my own data.
Is there,
The traffic in the middle of summer,
Oh.
to the residents' point, is very different than school year traffic.
This is what you said at the meeting in July, and they were supposed to, you requested it, they were gonna do a different one.
I mean,
That's why you
I look at
requested
data,
it during the school year.
changes.
The data's from
very-
April.
I have notes of
We did
July
it
that
in
we were
April
doing then.
because we didn't want to do it in the summer.
Great.
I think it was April 18th.
Okay, the motion, I just tried to move this along. Rick has made the motion to continue this. Did I get a second on this, please?
Second.
So, Ms. Collins has made the motion to continue this to May 5th. Mr. Brangle has made the, seconded the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So, thank you.